Chapter 1 The Raid. She read the letter one more time before relaying it to the men, as she knew following her lord's orders exactly wouldn't end well. Strike the town's guards, pillage for munitions, kill all but the children, Dahlia murmured to herself as she read the command on the paper. She looked up to the clearing ahead from her horse, taking in the glorious feeling of a raid brewing, a fight brewing. She took a deep breath of the cool, crisp air of an ash-filled morning before shouting to the troops, "All right, everyone, this will be easy. Simply slaughter their guards, raid their stores, and burn the homes. Kill as many of these sheep as you can, because they're too weak to be one of us." The soldiers shouted and cheered before quickly falling silent as their commander raised her hand. "Move! Forward!" she yelled as her and her troops galloped on their horses towards the small village. As the troops began the raid, the beautiful scenery was tarnished by the carnage. The lush green grass smothered by crimson red innocent blood and smashed by the falling corpses of innocents and soldiers alike. And the songs of the birds in the dark green forestry being drowned out by the wretched glass-breaking screams of the dying, and the iron clashing with the bone and flesh. The sound was intoxicating to her. Her hand was twitching on the hilt of her longsword, itching to find a worthy opponent. However, this was a small village. There was no way that was possible here. So, she stayed on the edge of town, circling to ensure there was no escapees. When she arrived at the eastern side of town, she found herself at the edge of a tree line. It would be difficult to navigate the trees on horseback, so she pulled down the mask of her helmet and dismounted her horse. It's dark in the forest, only illuminated by the gaps in the trees exposing the sun, so it was hard to see. But in the corner of her eye, she sees a shadowy figure running between the trees. Instincts take over as she pulls out her sword. "Come out!" she yells with an intimidating growl as she raises her sword defensively, spinning cautiously to watch all possible angles. As her opponent refused to show themselves, she begins to suspect that they had fled. "Typical sheep, you're not getting away," she says as she lowered her weapon and began to walk towards where she saw the shadow run off to. Finding a small hiking trail and assuming the shadow followed it, she follows the path and found it ended at a small cabin with a small forge beside it, roofed by an extension of the main cabin. Certainly, this is where the shadow was hiding, so she readied her sword, and she swung open the door. "Anyone home?" she said mockingly as her eyes adjusted to the dark interior, being lit exclusively by one candle. Despite the dark forest, the white light from the sun peeking through the thick tree branches was still brighter than the single warm flame from the candle. She scanned the room looking for anyone inside, and in the corner she saw children, about 3 of them, cowering with tears in their eyes behind an older man with a longsword readied. He looked like he was in his 40s, or maybe early 50s. He had a shaggy beard matching his ruffled, shaggy hair that went down to his temple. He had no armor, which was a shame. Not for his or the children's sake, no. No matter what kind of advantage or training this man had, he was no match for her, and that was boring to her. "You can either leave or die, your choice," the man says commandingly with a face of determination. Dahlia smiles under her helmet. If only he knew who she was and what she was capable of, she thought. "Are you the one who was in the forest? Why did you run?" "Are you mad? I am defending the children. I can't do that from beyond the grave." Dahlia laughed mockingly at the man. "You think that makes a difference in their fate?" she says threateningly. "It may. We may need a blessing to survive you monsters, but I'm not willing to throw that possibility away for an even lower chance of surviving out there." You think you're blessed? Nobody is blessed in war. It is as simple as day or night. You are either strong and you live with the spoils of the weak, or you're weak and you... I don't care about your philosophy on war. Either you leave or you fight me, the man shouts, interrupting Dahlia. War is important to her. It was and still is the only thing that treats her right. She was angry. She didn't just want to fight anymore. He deserved to die. She stepped closer to the man, who did the same, as he told the children to cover their eyes. She rolled her eyes before raising her sword, ready to fight. She savagely swings her sword at him overhead, and he quickly moves to parry with his own. And as her sword is locked with his, he kicks her in the stomach with a mix of precision and determination, knocking her back. Dahlia smiles before yelling and gripping her sword with one hand as she swings for his neck with all of the power she can muster behind it. And yet, all of that force is pointless as the man, almost casually, as if this was rehearsed, ducks below the blade, and as her sword passes, he pushes her against the wall with the tip of his sword. And as he continues to press his sword into her breastplate, he grabs the arm that is controlling the sword. You lost. Admit it, the man says with gritted teeth, fighting to keep Dahlia's arm pinned. Lost? I'm still breathing. I haven't lost, Dahlia says with a stubborn determination. Fine. Have it your way, the man says as he throws her to the ground and flips his sword to use the hilt as his weapon and delivers a crushing strike to her helmet with the pommel of the sword like a hammer, deforming the steel helmet. You coward, Dahlia says weakly as her consciousness begins to fade. Chapter 2, Week 1. When Dahlia came to, her vision was blurred with a throbbing pain in her head. She doesn't remember what happened until her vision came back and she was able to take in her situation. She was tied down to an uncomfortable wooden chair against a supporting beam of the cabin. As she struggles against the rope, she surveys the room, looking for any threats or exits. But then she saw her armor and her sword. Dahlia pauses. She looks down at herself, realizing she was stripped of her armor, down to the humbling tunic and breeches beneath what would normally be the steel extension of herself covering her. Her breath grows heavier as she triples her efforts and anxiously tries to break free of the rope. You're not getting out of that, says the man softly as he sips a tankard of water. Let me go, Dahlia yells angrily. Let me go now! Why? So you can try to kill me again? The man responds. Let me go! Dahlia says as she continues to struggle, ignoring the man's words as she presses against her bindings, determined to break free of the ropes. Why? Why tie me? Just kill me already! Don't make me wait for death! You want to take my life, do you not? Dahlia screams with desperation. She tried desperately to make him grant her death. She tried to reason it was dishonorable to keep a prisoner. He didn't respond. She tried to anger him by taunting him with the death and destruction that her troops had caused, but he didn't respond. Every single attempt fell on deaf ears as the man casually drank his water as he sat by the window. He didn't look like he was ignoring Dahlia, just not responding, which enraged her. Finally, she gives up on trying to convince him, and can then continue to struggle out of the chair, which still doesn't catch his attention, but she doesn't care. She was going to get out, and she was going to kill this man who disrespected her and all that she stands for. After she tried for what felt like hours, she became tired and quit struggling. In almost the same moment she gave up, the man spoke. I'm going hunting. I'll be back soon, the man says very directly as he takes a bow off the wall and then taking some small arrows out from the cabinet beside the door. You're leaving? Without killing me? What if I break out? I could kill you. No, I will kill you, Dahlia screams with determination as the man continues to prepare for his hunt. Do you not hear me? I will be the one to kill you, you coward. Afraid to kill someone? Pathetic. Ashfeld will be better off with you dead. Dahlia continues to scream as he walks out the door. Despite her confusion, she had no time to spare. If she wanted to ambush him on his way back, she needed to get out of these ropes now. So she struggled and struggled, but to no avail. Hours go by, and she still struggles against her ropes, exhausting herself to the point where she can't even struggle anymore. Soon, she begins to drift off from pure exhaustion until she hears the door swing open. She looks up to see the man carrying a large, muscular rabbit. "You're back," Dahlia says softly as she looks up hungrily at the rabbit. The man takes one look at her and sits down the rabbit on the table, and he pours a cup of water. He walks over to Dahlia and puts the cup to her parched lips. "Drink," the man responds. "No, I don't need your water," Dahlia responds stubbornly. "Drink," the man repeats, yet this time more demandingly. Dahlia, knowing she truly does need the drink, she nods, accepting the water and parting her lips and as the man leans the cup towards her gradually. The drink wasn't anything special, but to her, it was like wine. She enjoyed the rejuvenating feeling she got from hydrating after not getting as much as a sip since who knows how long. However, she was still angry, so she couldn't show her enjoyment of the drink. "There, I drank it. Happy?" Dahlia says sarcastically as the man stays silent, as he draws back and returns to the rabbit. He then begins butchering it, and then he begins to roast it in the fireplace. The delicious aroma of the roasting rabbit filled the cabin. It was a smoky, rich smell that was impossible to ignore. When it was done, the man tore it into small pieces and held one up to Dahlia's mouth. "I can't feed myself?" Dahlia asks. "No, you can't. I can't let you loose when I'm unarmed. I'm sorry," the man replied with a monotone voice, yet there was a hint of genuine sincerity. Dahlia wasn't going to argue, as despite how embarrassing it is to eat from his hand, with her hands tied down tightly at her waist, she couldn't eat without him, so that's what she regrettably had to do. Once they both ate, Dahlia stayed quiet and thought for a moment before she hesitantly asked a question. "What do you plan to do with me? You clearly want me alive, so why?" she asks, knowing most will want her head on a spike for what she does. "I know you're one of his subjects. That's why," the man replied with an edge to his words as he climbs into bed for the night. What? What do you mean by that?" Dahlia asks, confused by the answer. How much does he know about her? Who is this man? However, the man doesn't clarify. He lies down in bed and ignores all of Dahlia's further questions. Chapter 3, Week 2. The rest of the week went relatively the same, with exceptions of him leaving to go to town, as he says, which Dahlia had no clue what he does there, but she assumes there must be survivors and the town is still functioning, which isn't surprising, as if it was destroyed, her men would have found her. She wonders what happened to them, but she never got an answer. Dahlia also noticed he began bringing bigger arrows on his hunts, yet he never brought home bigger animals. Dahlia asked him many questions on this, but he never answered truthfully. He would give sarcastic answers, completely ignore her, or even tell her to just mind herself. But one day, for once, he answered one of her questions, clearly out of pure annoyance. "Why do you continue to care for me? What's your plan for me? I know you're not one of his subjects. It doesn't help me understand." The man sighs as his shoulders drop. "Look, I want you to know that war isn't everything, okay? I'm keeping you so you can enjoy life, eventually," he says with a solemn tone. Dahlia laughs in response. "Right, because I'm living the dream right now," she continues with palpable sarcasm. "I trust that you will learn what I mean in time, no matter how much time that takes," the man says as he picks up a small dagger, which combined with his mysterious nature sends adrenaline flooding Dahlia's system, although that doesn't necessarily mean she's afraid. The man notices this and as he puts the dagger away on his person. "Don't worry, just a precaution," he says as he begins untying her bonds. I trust you're smart enough to not fight me. What are you doing? Dahlia asks with anxious curiosity. I'm not gonna let you stink up my house, he responds with a smirk. Dahlia was shocked by the hospitality. She wasn't given this generosity as an enemy before. So she does in fact obey. She doesn't run, and when they go back inside, she doesn't fight the bindings. Why she does this, she couldn't fathom. Whether it was because she was stunned by the generosity, or she was falling for his false kindness, she didn't know. But she hated the idea of succumbing to either one. It was as cold as the highest mountains of Valkenheim that night. However, risking getting caught, freezing in the river, or tripping over holes hidden by the tall grass was all worth it to see the town. Aurea doesn't remember city life outside of the raids. However, every time they trained on the cliffside, Aurea would lose focus of the training opponent, being enamored by the distant sounds of the city you could see perfectly on the top of the cliff or the forest they stayed in. The distant clopping of horses, laughter and joyous screaming of the children, normal children, and the songs from the church. Aurea longed to see something like Mother and Father's town without fire and blood. So tonight, Aurea will see it. Aurea will succeed this time. Aurea, what are you doing? The child superior asked interrogatively as he grabbed the kid by the shoulder firmly with a painful grip. Nothing. I was just... Aurea was interrupted by a painful slap to the face. Don't you play dumb with me, you brat. You were trying to sneak off again, huh? Do you want me to report you to Lord Skull? No, I'll go back. I swear it, the child says pleadingly. You'll never be a warrior worth the dirt you stand on. You can't follow an instruction as simple as stay away from the city. You prefer to go prancing pathetically in the streets among the weak. Isn't that right? You must go back and train throughout the night to make up for this disloyalty. As Aurea was dragged back to the camp, a promise was made. Aurea was only known as a weak brat who wasn't worth anything, constantly getting distracted by petty things like the city. Tired of the implications of lack of skill and worth, Aurea screamed out of faith that would drive the rest of Aurea's existence. You think me pathetic? I will prove you wrong. I will become so strong I will kill 30 men with one swing of my sword. I will become more than a soldier. I will become a guarantee of death to those who oppose me. And once I'm strong, I will be taking your position. Curse the town. Everyone looks down on me solely for wanting to see what I had. So I'll give in. I will become the best, Aurea said with conviction. But the officer just laughed. Glad you finally came to, because cannon fodder is all you orphans are good for. Chapter 4, Week 3. The days went by with the usual routine. He did chores, hunted, ate, let her finally walk, and then he read. Until the man suddenly came into the cabin and grabbed her sword. Dahlia's heart drops as her color in her already pale skin fades to an almost snow white. Do you see this as your identity? As who you are? The man asks while he points the sword at her. I have noticed you often glare at it. Is it because you see it as who you are? Dahlia was shocked by the bold assumption. However, he wasn't entirely wrong. Sure, she may have been very bold and adamant of her beliefs of combat, but was it that obvious? It may be. When I finally put on my armor, when I became a warrior, I finally realized who I was, who I am, Dahlia responded hesitantly. Why do you ask? Come with me, the man says as he cuts her bindings with the sword. She hesitated to stand. She only got to walk at dusk, yet it was midday. Why go anywhere now? On top of that, he cut the bindings instead of untying them. Dahlia follows the man outside, and he stops in front of the furnace of his forge. It was blazing. The heat could be felt from a horse's length away. Its mouth was an angry mix of reds and oranges, the flame inside hungry for something to burn. This is not you, the man says, holding up the sword. "Do you understand that? This is simply a tool cursed by the blood of innocents, which by extension have cursed you. You must cut out the root," he says as he holds it by the blade, offering her the sword. Dahlia knew he was defenseless. Even the greatest warrior couldn't win unarmed. She could kill him now, simply grab the sword and push it forward, straight into his gut. But he looked as if he knew that, which, for once, intimidated her. This was the only man who has ever been able to match her strength, so despite her advantage, she couldn't bring herself to attempt it. Dahlia grabbed the sword from him and lifted it to examine it. She hasn't held it in a long time. She wiped away the dust it had gathered and swung it, just to remember what it felt like. "Is there no other way?" she asked the man. "If you truly see this as yourself, you're sick. This is the medicine." What do you expect of me? Why make me do this?" "As I have said, you will understand in time. I wish I could explain it all to you now, but this curse has progressed too far for you to understand it." Dahlia took in his words, trying to understand them, but there was no use. So, curious to see where all this might lead, or maybe she was waiting for this opportunity, she tossed her sword into the hungry, blazing mouth of the furnace, and both watched as the leather grip was set ablaze, and watched as the steel was singed black. Then as the fire continued to eat it away, it became hot yellow, then orange. Then finally, it started to deform from the heat. Dahlia watched, feeling the angry red flames prick at her deep blue eyes with a sinking feeling in her heart. Aurea worked to prove the promise true, and in some ways, it was. Aurea was still too young to be promoted to the rank desired, but it was close, as Lord Skull requested Aurea to lead a raid of Bravenhold that was challenging our power and needs to learn, as Lord Skull put it. Aurea didn't care what the real reason was. It was a village, a city. Yes, it would be under siege, but at least for a moment, Aurea would see a city. Something Aurea dreamed of visiting for years upon years at this point. So, of course, Aurea led the charge. Bravenhold was huge. Even in the distance, it was magnificent. Magnificent as the one by the camp that everyone's childhood was spent in. Aurea was disappointed that most of those beautiful homes, shops, and churches would be destroyed, be torn down by flame, as well as the songs of the church and children's play had to come to an end. But these people can't challenge Skull. He was a noble and kind man for teaching all of these orphans how to fight and giving them an education, and even taught the most devoted the ability to read. He gave us purpose, Aurea thought. The convoy reached the town, and the citizens gathered to watch this army of troops fall into formation over the hill. These soldiers make room for one silhouette to pass through to the front. The silhouette raised their hand as the soldiers in the back line shuffle, too distant to see behind the front line of men and horses. Then the silhouette pointed at the town, and then a rain of magma flew from the back rank. The citizens didn't understand completely until the arrows hit the ground. Then another, and then another. A path of flaming arrows crawled up towards the crowd before it struck a man in the chest, and he fell to the ground. All of this in a moment. The crowd ran for cover, screaming and pleading for the guards to save them, and the guards led the panicking citizens to the fort in the center of town. Those who weren't shot in the back by an arrow, that is. "Quickly! Close the gates!" one guard yelled at the guard on top of the garrison. "No! Please! Let me in!" A young woman cried out with so many tears streaming down. Her face was already red and swollen, crawling towards his feet with an arrow sticking out from her back like a flagpole sticking to the ground. The guard winced, knowing it was wrong to leave her to die to these unknown soldiers. Who were they? The Order of Horkos? No, there was no time to think about who they are. The young man looks at the girl, the poor, bloody, dying girl groveling in the mud. I'm sorry, he says solemnly before he turns to run to the castle. But then he hears the girl crying out to someone, whether it was to him, another, or to God himself to save her. He simply can't take it. It's what's right to save her. So he turns around and heaves her over his shoulder. He ignores all of the death around him, trying to save one life, but it's all in vain. As the young man felt a sharp pain along his side as he watches a soldier on a horse run past him, swinging his blade in the air to flick off the fresh blood. He looks down and sees a large gash cutting him nearly in half, his blood staining his gambeson almost instantly. He falls to the ground on top of the girl, which shoves the arrow clean through her, guaranteeing death for both of them. Aurea watched this scene unfold, as well as many others dying in similarly pitiful ways. It made Aurea sad, not to see these people die so pathetically, but the opposite. Why did they just stand there as like cattle as the arrows were prepared and as they were flying? Why didn't the guards organize as soon as they saw them on the hilltop? These people were stupid, weak, and pathetic. Aurea now understood why Lord Skull kept his trainees away from civilization. Because it was weak, and if Aurea and the others were exposed to that, they would be too. The reason for the raid wasn't to teach a lesson, it was to kill the weak, and help the next generation to become strong, to push humanity to become better. And Aurea couldn't be more proud and thankful for Lord Skull. Chapter 5, Week 7. Life was surprisingly good for Dahlia, as best as it can be for a prisoner anyway, as the man finally allowed her to live at the cabin without restraints, as long as she doesn't go to town and helps with the chores. She was never really good at any of them. She struggled with chopping wood, and she doesn't clean clothes very well. She hated sweeping and cleaning, and she could only cook the type of meals you would expect a caveman to enjoy. Though there was one task she excelled at: hunting. She was raised to learn how to sneak up on unsuspecting targets and also how to use a bow, which made her almost a natural. There, by the river, the man says with a hushed voice as he crouches down, hiding behind the shrubbery. Dahlia crouches beside him before looking up at the river. She saw the deer. It was beautiful. Its antlers had 10 points, and its white dotted pelt was incredibly clean, despite it being a wild animal. Here, shoot it while it's still, he whispers as he pulls an arrow from his quiver, giving her the arrow. Dahlia shakes her head, snapping herself out from the trance of the animal, as she grabs the arrows and knocks it on the bow. Dahlia takes a deep breath as the deer leaned its head down to drink from the river. Dahlia pulls the string back, the bow creaking as it stretched, and then she let it fly. The arrow precisely struck the deer in the head, right behind the eye, straight through the skull. The deer fell into the shallow riverbank, its blood dyeing the flowing water a translucent shade of red. The two relaxed as they stood back up, and they approached the corpse. "You did well. Let's take it back," the man says as he analyzes the deer and removes the arrow from its skull with a faint crunch of the fractured skull grazed by the removal of the metal tip. The two grabbed the deer by the hooves, and they carried it back towards the horses before they returned to the cabin. They followed the path that Dahlia knew well back to the cabin, until they got to the fork in the road. And of course, they would turn straight east, towards the cabin. But he took the path northeast. "Should we not go east?" Dahlia asks as she pulls on the reins of the horse, coming to a halt, and hearing her question, the man did the same. "I trust you, so I'd like you to accompany me. Besides, you probably want some company other than me," the man replied with a huff as he continued down the path while motioning her to follow. Well, I'm glad you enjoy my company," Dahlia says semi-sarcastically as she whips the reins, signaling the horse to follow behind. "Don't be. Don't get me wrong, I don't like you, and nobody else will if they realize who you are. So don't act dumb, let me do the talking," the man responds bluntly, acting as if this was common knowledge. "Sorry, what did I do to deserve that response?" Dahlia responds bitterly. "A man once told me that you can steal from someone, but then give it back. You can lie to someone, then tell the truth. You can even hurt someone, but then they can heal. But you can't give someone their life back. Your atrocities can't be repaired. So whoever you were had to die, and you must be reborn, the man says with a heavy heart. For the first time, she felt ashamed for her actions. The people she killed are gone, and the family that is left behind are arguably worse off. She felt disgusted with herself, not only because of her brutality, but also because of her lack of consideration of it as well. I'm sorry, she murmured, ashamed. Don't be. Although it was your actions, you were just doing as you were told. Besides, I don't think I could forgive you anyway, so save your breath, the man says harshly. Dahlia fell silent, ashamed of herself. She was embarrassed by the mere idea that he could forgive her, too. After all, he was right. So she stayed quiet for the rest of the ride. When the two could see the town over the horizon, the man slowed down and looked back at Dahlia. All right, you are a runaway survivor of another town that was burnt down, and I found you on a hunt, and your scars are from the scrapes you got from fleeing, as well as from Mother Nature. You were sick and wounded, but getting better. I'll say I've been taking care of you until you healed, hence why this is your first appearance here. Dahlia nods, still refusing to speak. The two ride into town and hitched up at a storefront. The sign read Ben's Butchery, which told Dahlia where exactly the man had been taking all of the animals. The man slung the big deer from his horse to his shoulder and swung open the door. Dahlia followed closely. Well, this is earlier than usual, the gruff bearded man behind the counter said as he sharpened a cleaver before putting it onto the counter to help get the deer onto the table at the back wall of the store. Who's the lady? He says as he nods at Dahlia. My name is Dahlia, sir, Dahlia says softly. Nice to meet you, Miss Dahlia. I'm Benjamin. Benjamin Todor, Benjamin says as he reaches his hand out for a handshake. Dahlia slowly returns the gesture, as she hadn't shaken hands with anyone for years. How'd you wind up here, if I might ask? Dahlia was prepared to respond, but was cut off by the man she came in with. She says she's from another town that was raided, and she was one of the only ones who were able to get away alive. I found her a couple days ago on a hunt, and she was barely living, so I helped her get back to health. Well, I'm sorry that happened to you. I don't know if it's noticeable, but we were attacked too, so I understand what you've gone through, in some ways. The only reason we aren't dead is because of Mr. Garen here. Don't worry, you'll be safe with him. He's actually a war hero. He's here because his legion assimilated Horkos. Right, Garen? I'm not going to stoop low enough to associate with senseless killing, Garen said. Well, whatever the reason is, you're a blessing to us here, Garen, Benjamin said with a pat on Garen's shoulder. And he's a blessing to you too, it seems, he says as he points at Dahlia. Anyway, we got a village to feed and a beautiful deer to cut, so I'll see you tomorrow, Garen. And it was nice to meet you, Dahlia, Benjamin says as he walks Dahlia and Garen to the door. As the two of them start towards their horses, they hear a woman shout, Alex! Julie! Get back here! Don't bother Sir Garen! Down the street, two children run to Garen, and the boy jumps at him. He catches the boy, spinning around with him, lifted in the air before putting him back on the ground. Hey, Alexander, Garen says softly to the boy with a smile, a severe contrast to what Dahlia has known him as. Hey, Julie, he says as the boy's sister runs to hug Garen around his waist. Children, listen to your mother. I know we all love Sir Garen, but he's busy, the children's mother says scoldingly at her children. Don't worry, Mrs. Grisham. It's fine. I'm not too busy, Garen says kindly to the mother. Does this mean you could take me hunting, Mr. Garen? Alexander asks with stars in his eyes. Garen laughs softly at Alex's optimism. I told you, kiddo. I'll take you when you're older. But that'll be forever, Alex whines in response. This unfamiliarity unnerves Dahlia, so she attempts to hide behind the horses, trying to stay inconspicuous. But Lady Grisham spots her trying to avoid eye contact and smiles coyly at Garen. Oh, who's your friend? She says teasingly as everyone's attention is drawn to Dahlia. Garen sighs, embarrassed by Grisham's assumption. No, Lady Grisham. This is a runaway from another raided town. She barely got out. I'm just helping her get back on her feet," Garen says as Grisham's face drops from coy to empathetic and worried, shocked by Dahlia's fictitious situation. "Hello," Dahlia says shyly, pink with embarrassment. "I'm so sorry to hear about your town, young lady. Where are you from?" Grisham asks, which catches both Dahlia and Garen off guard. I don't really want to talk about it," Dahlia says sheepishly, expertly dodging the question. "That's all right, young lady. There's no need to if you don't want to. You know what? Here, take this home," Grisham says as she reaches into the basket she had resting on her forearm, and she pulls out a fresh, fluffy loaf of bread. "We can always buy more, but you need it. Please take it." Dahlia looks at Garen with nervous eyes, pleading for some guidance, as she's never been given any of this kindness before. What did she do to deserve the bread? She has done nothing for her, so why? Garen looked at Dahlia and gestured to the loaf. Dahlia snaps back into reality, and she takes the loaf timidly. Garen walks beside her and puts a hand on Dahlia's shoulder with a tight grasp. Thank you, ma'am," Dahlia says softly, still in shock from her first experience of true, unconditional kindness, and Garen's grip relaxes. The little girl approaches Dahlia. She was a short, innocent little girl, and she looked familiar to Dahlia, but she couldn't put her finger on it. "I'm sorry about your village. Our village is still safe because of Mr. Garen. He kept me, my brother, and his friend Daniel safe. There was this one big knight who came inside, but Mr. Garen beat him up. Mr. Garen will probably protect you too if those mean knights come back," Julie said innocently as she wrapped her little arms around Dahlia's waist, trying to comfort her. Dahlia was struggling to hold back tears. After all she's done, why is she treated so kindly? She has never felt this warm inside as well as disgusted at the same time. Why? Why be kind to someone who would have killed you? Why be kind to someone who would have burned your home? Why be kind to an enemy soldier? Why be kind to a killer? It didn't make sense. Dahlia's head hurt just trying to think about it, which didn't help how she wanted to cry. But she was too strong for that, so she held it down until the family went on their way. The two saddled back up onto their horses and began their trek back to the cabin. Dahlia couldn't believe any of it, and it all showed vividly on her face, almost like you can read her mind. "Are you all right, Dahlia?" Garen says. Hearing her name from his voice for the first time wasn't shocking, but she felt a pang of unease in her heart before she answered. Are people really this kind? Why?" Dahlia stutters out, trying to hold back the tears from the confrontation. "People can be anything. Bad, good. They could be devils or they could be angels." "What am I then?" Dahlia asked, hesitantly, scared of the answer. "You," Garen says, as he pauses in deep thought, "you are like me, in a way, when I was in the Steel Vanguard. You took shape after the orders assigned to you, yes?" "I suppose," Dahlia says with a sigh, relieved that she isn't seen as some demon, unlike others she knew of, the one she learned from. Aurea led the charge of many other raids on villages, each one getting more successful than the last, to the point where Skull himself wanted to speak with Aurea. This was a huge moment for Aurea, as Skull was everyone's hero. Aurea looked back to the vow that led all the way to this moment, to be the best. It was shocking how far along that goal has come. Skull was beyond only a single door, a door that was unlocked for Aurea. After taking a deep breath, Aurea walked into the office. There he was, right across the room. Skull. Lord Skull. "Ah, you must be Aurea," he said as he looked up at Aurea, with a shine reflecting on his black, goat-like horns coming out from the temples of his head. "You've done a lot for me, Aurea," he said with a cunning yet charismatic smile. I try my best, my lord, Aurea responds, bowing her head. You are like a master for your age. I remember that you were a troublemaker in training. What changed? Skull said with a smirk. I made a vow to be here. Aurea responds hesitantly, not entirely sure what he wanted to hear. Skull laughs softly in response. Well, that sounds like a warden. I don't think you're warden material, Skull says harshly while looking Aurea up and down. Aurea is unsure if the insult deserves a reaction or not. Well, I may not be, my lord. However, I try my best, right? Aurea says shakily. Yes, but trying your best doesn't get results unless you are the best. Are you the best? Skull says harshly again. The rough tone hurts Aurea. She came so far just to be insulted by her hero. Aurea bites her tongue from speaking her mind. Out of my class, I am, yes. Skull sighs and rolls his reptile-like eyes. Aurea, dear girl, you don't fight your peers anymore. You fight real warriors, he says condescendingly as he palms his forehead as if he had a headache. But I'd still like to see your skill. Let's go spar, Skull says as he stands up from his desk. Would you mind? He says as he takes the ornate swords off the wall, handing Aurea one of them. Come, let's go outside to the dueling grounds. Aurea nods before Skull brushes past and opens the door, holding it for Aurea. Aurea follows Skull to the courtyard of his fort, which held a small, fenced area. The courtyard was beautifully green and lush with grass, but in the fence of the arena, the ground was bare. The floor was just flat dirt, so when dueling, no one could trip or fall over, which was a huge advantage to Aurea, as Skull was way too strong to overpower, but Aurea was known to have some very fancy footwork. So this would be a big advantage against Skull. Are you ready? Skull says as he raises his sword, standing across from Aurea in the arena. Aurea nods and gets ready as well. Skull swings from above, and Aurea quickly parries and thrusts into his armor-plated stomach, shoving him into the fence of the arena before scratching his face with her clawed gauntlets. Skull pushes back and attempts to swing from the side, and Aurea assumes Skull will follow through with this strike, so Aurea dashes to the opposite side, preparing a strike of her own, but it was pointless, as Skull feinted the attack, quitting halfway through the swing and parrying her attempted counter, before he pushes his sword in a precise, focused attack into Aurea's breastplate, pushing forward and sending Aurea stumbling backward. Skull continues his barrage, swinging his sword in a flurry of blows. Aurea recovers from the stumble and is able to block every blow, but only barely, not being able to find any openings between the blows. Aurea and Skull get locked into a stalemate, both exerting themselves to either defend themselves or attack the other. After a couple more exchanged furious blows, both disengage to recruit themselves. You're pretty good, kid. Usually those that I face against fail after a few good blows, but I can't seem to hit you. You move like a spider. Isn't that ironic? Aurea, the spider. Glad you're on my side. Here, I want you to have my sword. Skull flips his sword and grabs it by the blade, offering the sword to Aurea in a familiar way. It was beautiful. The pearl handle engraved for extra grip. The silver coin pommel had a rose engraved into it on either side, with a silver crossguard that had small jewels intricately placed along it. The bright, shiny blade had contrasting black engravings that ran down the center of the blade. Aurea looked at Skull, looked at his horns, and then she all saw it in his red eyes. All in a singular moment, she saw his lies, his schemes, his wrath, and his greed. It all disgusted Aurea, so Aurea grabbed the sword and simply pushed it into Skull's gut, with all of the rage and anger of the people he had killed being so strong and wrathful that the sword was able to stab clean through his plate armor and everything beneath it. Skull was shocked. As he stumbled back coughing up dark, nearly black blood from how much there was spilling out from his wound in his mouth. His skull fell to the ground in a puddle of his own blood. Aurea felt amazing, like a huge weight was taken away, now that that demon that she was raised by was finally dead. Chapter 6, Week 10. Dahlia awoke on the small bedroll by the fireplace. Despite the conditions she slept in, she woke up with lots of bright energy, almost as if she had a new conviction inside of her. As for once, she felt like she was able to be natural. Not the version that she knew, but the commonly accepted answer. She has been to town many times since her first time, and she often watches the people. She examines the way they live, how they talk, and how they held themselves. However, she mainly watched the women. She decided that she can't continue to act the way that she was raised and continue the lies she and Garen built for her. She watched the other ladies, saw the mothers being very caring to their children and cleaning their porches up and homes, which annoyed Dahlia as she wasn't keen on cleaning just to blend in. And she saw the young women work the taverns and chat with the young bucks. But she was most interested in the cooks. She loved the smells from their kitchens, the deep fruity smells of their pies, the varied rich smells of their seasoned meats, and the subtle hint of golden wheat and sugar of the freshly broken bread. They were far better than what she could do, and she was very curious if the food tasted the same as it smelled. That morning, she felt like a woman. Not physically, she already knew that, and not biologically, because she already knew that as well. But for the first time, she felt womanly. She didn't know why it was all of a sudden, but she was excited. She got up from the bedroll and looked around the cabin. She was alone. She sat up and stretched her arms widely, and got up and continued to stretch the rest of her body. She got dressed and walked outside, finding Garen chopping wood. "Morning," Dahlia said with a tired tone. "How are you, sir?" "Fine," Garen says without giving Dahlia any attention, focusing on his task. This wasn't unusual, as Garen has never talked much until he finished his daily chores. He was always very focused on his goals. Dahlia discovered that the day she met the man. Will we be needing to go to town today?" Dahlia asks, clearly anticipating a visit. "No. The people have become self-sufficient again. They got everything they need covered. All they need is some help with construction, and although I'm sure you're capable of that kind of labor, they wouldn't want you to work," Garen says, still focused on his axe in the wood. "Can we go see if they want any help with anything else?" "If you want to go, go. You don't need me to go visit town," Garen said, as he leaned on his axe like a cane while looking at Dahlia with a reassuring gaze. This was surprising to Dahlia, as she never went anywhere outside of the land surrounding the cabin alone, but what was more intimidating was to go to town alone. What would she say? She's not antisocial. She just doesn't know how to talk to someone who isn't giving or receiving orders. How do you have a normal conversation? But she wanted to know. How do you cook food? She had to ask. When Dahlia got to Grimwald, she walked down the main street with excitement, both good and bad, from the freedom of being alone. She was overwhelmed by the clanging of hammers from the blacksmiths, the stall owners shouting out to the passing crowds to advertise their goods, groups of men and women of all ages chatting on the street, and the bells, the beautiful morning bells of the church. She heard them all the time, but only if it was to warn the citizens of a raid. She has never heard them like this. She has been in life-threatening fights, full-scale battles against a force bigger than her own, and she has had many arrows fired at her, yet she has never felt so alive. Anxiously, she walks the streets. Why was it so crowded? The street has never had this many people, but whatever the reason, she had a goal. She wandered out the main walkways and into a quieter residential area. She was following the scent of food, searching for another teacher. She eventually found an open window with a woman inside. The contrasting light of the sun and indoors was too great to really see inside. But just as if the lady inside read Dahlia's mind, she approached the window and put a fresh meat pie on the windowsill to let it cool. It was steaming. Piping hot steam was flowing from the pastry like water does a fountain. It danced over and into Dahlia's nose. It smelled like delicious beef encased in bread that had a perfect balance of crisp and fluff, the texture so distinct she could practically smell it. Dahlia approached the window and took a better look at the pie. The woman was turned around and cleaning up the mess that was made when she was preparing the pie. "Can you show me how you make this?" Dahlia asks, making the woman jump. Then she turned to Dahlia, and she got a good look at the lady. She was an older lady, probably just above Garen, so maybe late 50s or 60s. She had grays in her hair, but mostly it was a bright brown. She had wrinkles about her face that screamed that she was a grandmother, and so did her homely dress and apron.
"Oh dear, you scared me."
I'm sorry, ma'am."
"Oh, it's quite all right, young lady. You didn't scare me enough to kill me, so you'll have to try it harder than that," the lady said with a chort. "But yes, it's quite all right, girl. Just don't walk up to someone's window. If my husband were here, you'd probably get hurt. He isn't very fond of strangers, so he'd probably think you're just some ruffian here to cause trouble."
I'm sorry. I've been quite detached from most of society. I've just recently healed from my injuries, Dahlia says nervously as the lady squints a little. She recognizes the description.
"Oh, you're the young runaway. I've heard of you from around town. Please, come inside. I'll get the door for you."
Dahlia walks around the corner and to the door, which swings open as she approaches.
"My name is Rosca, but most who know me call me Grandma Rose. Call me whichever you like. What's your name, Mrs.?"
"Dahlia, Lady Rose. My name is Dahlia," Dahlia says with a small bow.
"Dahlia. That's a beautiful name. So, what did you need from me?"
I want to learn how to cook. I was never able to learn," Dahlia says softly.
"No. I'm very sorry to hear that. Cooking is quite the task, girl, but it is very rewarding. Come, I'll show you."
Rosca showed Dahlia many things. She showed her how to make bread and what it needs to rise. She showed her the differences between all the meats and differences between all the seasonings. She showed her the uses for all the pots, pans, and the griddle, and how to use the oven. Rosca taught her a lot of things, and Dahlia took her teachings in deeply. When the sun was about to start setting, the two exchanged pleasantries and Dahlia parted, promising to come back tomorrow. When Dahlia begins her trek to the cabin, she walks past a group of men who begin to gossip amongst themselves as she passes. Dahlia felt unnerved by the attention, but she was partly glad that they didn't confront her about her quote-unquote hometown. She gently opened the door to the cabin so as to not awake Garen if he was asleep. And of course, he was reading under the candlelight and few remaining rays of sunlight shooting into the cabin sparsely from the horizon. Garen looks up from the book, seeing Dahlia. "I'm glad you didn't run off, Dahlia," Garen says as he gets back to his text. "Have you eaten anything, sir?" "Yes, I have. Yours is on the table," Garen replies as he gestures to the table by the kitchenette. "Thank you, sir," Dahlia says with a relieving sigh as she slumps down into the rickety wooden chair, preparing to eat. Garen grunts in approval, a silent way of acknowledging her graciousness. After a moment of silence, broken by the occasional crack of the fire, Dahlia cleared her throat and spoke. "Do you think I could cook tomorrow?"
Garen chuckled before responding, still without looking up from his book. You? Do you not remember what you made last time? God, no. I want to learn to cook. I got someone to teach me. Dahlia pauses to remember her name. Roska? You got Grandma Rose to teach you? What did you learn from her? Garen asked, surprisingly curious, looking up from his book. Mainly how to use the tools of the kitchen, Dahlia says with an explanatory tone. Oh, she taught me how to make bread, Dahlia says proudly, excited to talk with Garen about her personal achievements. Maybe there's hope for you yet, Dahlia, Garen says with a teasing undertone below his monotone voice. Garen closes his book and gets up from his bed. He walks over to his coin purse and takes out a few coins. He walks over to the table and sat the coins down in a perfect stack. Buy the stuff for it, and you can make up some bread. The next day came, and Dahlia was excited. She immediately went to Roska's house, with Garen's permission, of course, and she told Rose about her situation, how she wants to impress Garen with her newfound skill while practicing actively. You want to try to impress Garen? That's a difficult task. He's very generous to others, but he refuses to allow others to do the same. Collectively, the town has attempted to give him many gifts, but he refuses, so I doubt he'll even allow you to. He refuses to burden others with any more tasks than they have to. Garen told me to. I asked if I could. Then, of course, he said no. But when I told him you were teaching me, he changed his mind. He even gave me the coin to compensate you for the ingredients, Dahlia says as she holds out the coins, shining in the early golden sun. Roska smiles coyly before laughing softly with a shaking head. Oh, that dear man, she says as she pushes Dahlia's hand away. Is there something wrong, ma'am? Why won't you accept? Dahlia says, offering the coin once more with an underlying anger. Oh, no, young lady. I never said I refuse. I just refuse the coin. You could use a wardrobe change, to say the least. You don't look like any cook with those clothes. Go use that coin to buy some new ones, Roska says as she turns back inside her home. Here, take this. It isn't a lot, but you can get at least one loaf with it, she says as she hands over various ingredients to Dahlia. Garen should have the beer and water on hand, yes? Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Dahlia says sheepishly, once again surprised by the commoner's natural kindness. Dahlia and Roska once again exchange pleasantries as Dahlia takes her leave. She decided to lug the crate of goods over to the market square. She would be interested in new clothes, preferably ones that would make her fit in more, as she was paranoid enough. The eyes curious about her old gambeson and breeches gave her too much attention. However, the mornings were when the square was busiest, with many setting up their stalls with customers lining up to get the freshest veggies they can get. The crowds made navigating almost treacherous. Dahlia, are you trying to get somewhere in particular? A man says after tapping Dahlia on the shoulder. She turns around to see 3 men, 2 of which being saddled up on top of horses, while the third is dismounted, being the one who spoke. Yes, I am actually. How do you know me? Dahlia responds, with her anxiety spiking. Well, I heard talk of the runaway being named Dahlia. I mean, no disrespect by it, but it is quite obvious who you are with your clothing. Dahlia holds back from retorting at the comment. That is something I'm actually trying to fix. I'm looking for the tailor. Can you point me in the direction of his shop? Dahlia asks the man. She listens intently to his words, yet she can't help but do the same to his friend's words as well. She heard things like she dresses like a warrior, she has the arms of a Viking berserker, and she is definitely not a normal woman. Though their comments truly struck anger down into Dahlia's heart, this man was being helpful, so she held her tongue, thanked him, and went down to the tailor's. Dahlia walked into the building
and she was stunned by the vibrant colors of the cloth strung up on the walls. Lots of greens, bright blues, blooming yellows, and burning reds, all of which clashing against the dark blank browns and grays of the hard wooden walls and the dirt-covered stone floors. The tailor sat at his table with his feet kicked up onto it, his leather poulines bright and clean, fidgeting with constant movement as he knit patterns with vibrant colors. He clearly took pride in his work, wearing bright green hose with a deep red waffenrock and hat to match. When he noticed Dahlia, he jumped up with an almost annoying enthusiasm.
Good morning, missus. How are you in this bright morning?
Good. Well, I could be better, but I'm otherwise good, Dahlia answers with a tone that seemed depressing compared to his.
Well, I'm sorry you can't be the best you can be today, but perhaps a new dress can raise your mood, the tailor says, promoting his product with pride. I haven't had an order today, so I can start on a personalized dress right away if you wish.
Sir. Dahlia attempts to interrupt him. However, the tailor continues to talk about what materials he has, what patterns he can do, and listless amounts of other things while he searches for his workspace for his measurement tools.
Sir, Dahlia said loudly, which finally got through to his ear. Sir, I don't have any true preference. I would just like something nice. Do you have that on hand?
Something on hand? Well, yes, I suppose. I think I have one or two that should fit you. The tailor walked back further into his shop and came back with a rolled navy blue dress under his arm. This should fit. You can try it on behind that room divider, the tailor said as he handed the rolled dress to Dahlia. Dahlia walked into the small dressing room and examined the dress. Although she knew what they looked like, she had never really thought about how you put them on. Upon some examination, she found that it seemed like just a very long tunic. So, as if she was putting one on, she slipped it on her head and pulled it down so the rest of her body would follow. The dress was soft. The tailor clearly knew what he was doing, making something as soft as a lamb. When she shoved her arms into place, she examined herself as much as she could without a mirror. She noticed how long it was, reaching down to her ankles, as well as how it looked. The dress was beautiful. It wasn't a royal type of beauty, but a humble mix of elegance and serenity. It was a soft navy blue base with a collar and rim of every other hole having a golden yellow trim that provided a stark contrast between the deep blue base of the dress.
Oh, yes, that looks amazing on you. Not bragging, I just think that the blue matches your eyes, as well as the trim matching your hair. Although your hair is much brighter than the yellow on the dress, he says as Dahlia walked out from the dressing room. Yes, I love it. Thank you very much. How much will this cost? Dahlia asks as she continued to examine and fidget with her new dress. Dahlia pays for the dress before she grabs her things and takes her leave, all while profusely thanking the tailor as she is out the door. Dahlia begins her trek back to the cabin while carrying the crate of supplies, as well as her old clothes draped over the box. Garen was outside, chopping wood as he usually was this early. He notices movement in the corner of his eye and looks over to see Dahlia, though it took him a minute to recognize her. "Where'd you get that?" he says as he sits the axe down by the remaining logs and takes the crate from Dahlia. "Lady Rosa gave the supplies to me, but she didn't want the coin. Then she told me to use them for better clothes. I admit I feel odd in this, but I do like it. Do you?" Dahlia asks as she stretches the skirt of her dress to show off the beautiful golden trim at the end of it. "I will admit, you do look good in it," Garen says after taking a glance of her new outfit before turning to the door and swinging it open. He sits the box down and takes the layer of clothing on top and throws it over on a chair. "Do we have the beer and water for it?" Dahlia asks as she starts to unpack the crate. "We do. I checked last night," Garen says as he walked back to the door. I'll be out here. Don't mess this up now, or you won't be in the kitchen for much more," he said sarcastically before he turned outside and closed the door behind him. Dahlia wasted no time, immediately taking the mortar and pestle and began to crush down the grain. With enough time, she had all of it down to a light flour. She poured it onto the table and dug a small hole in the middle. She began pouring the water and beer in the center, slowly mixing it into the flour until it was all together in one unit of dough. She then put the dough onto the wooden peel to stick it into the already blazing oven without burning herself. She was hopeful for the end product. After waiting for some time, she could smell the bread, fully cooked and done. She took it out safely and placed it on the windowsill to cool, just as Rosca has. The bread was still cooking when it was taken out from the heat alone, which burnt the corner slightly, but it still looked appetizing. Garen closed his book and got up, walking over to the window. He grabbed the loaf, which was now cool, and tore off the burnt corners. Dahlia looked up from her bedroll at Garen, hopeful for a good reaction. Garen took the loaf to the table, cut a piece off, and ate it. "This," Garen said between bites, with an unreadable expression, stressing Dahlia out even further. "This is good, for your first loaf, at least." Dahlia couldn't contain her smile. "You think so? Really?" Dahlia said with a hopeful, high-pitched voice. "Come and see for yourself," Garen said as he began to cut another piece. Dahlia got up and walked over to his side of the table. She took the piece he offered and took a small, nervous bite. It was decent. She was underwhelmed by its taste. She couldn't describe it any better than just saying it just tastes like bread. However, she was still very pleased with Garen's reaction. "If you want to, I can buy some more variety of things for you to try to make," Garen said with a kind tone, which was the first time he ever offered her to do something for her above the bare minimum. "That would be great, if you would." Chapter 7, Week 13. As the days went by, Dahlia was enjoying her life, something she always thought she was doing until now. She was given the most freedom she has ever had, which is ironic, as just shy of 3 months ago she was a prisoner, but that was far behind her now. In fact, she winces at the thoughts that sneak up into her head when she sees her now dusty armor outside by the forge, the atrocities she had committed, as well as her hot temper when it came to the commoners that would give her glances. Garen would expect better, she thought. Garen wasn't home at the moment, and Dahlia was left alone at the cabin. It wasn't time to cook yet, and she had already cleaned the house, so she had nothing to do. She sat at the table with the book that Garen had just finished reading. Besides combat, reading was the only other thing she was truly good at from her time as a commander. When Garen got back, he dragged his feet tidily into the cabin, throwing a rabbit onto the counter by the wash basin. "I didn't know you could read," Garen said before he sat down in his bed with a relaxed sigh. I'm sorry. I just finished all my tasks, so I thought I could..." Dahlia stuttered out before being interrupted by Garen. "What are you reading?" Just what you have been reading," Dahlia answered softly. Garen sighed again as he stretched. "That's all right. As long as you don't ruin the thing, read all you want. I'm going to take a nap. That dang rabbit gave me quite the chase. Wake me up when you have something made, will you?" Garen began to turn and lay down onto the bed after Dahlia nodded and got back to reading. After some time, Dahlia struggled to read due to the sun rays flying down right onto the page, which made the words hard to read. This made Dahlia realize how much time has passed. So she closed the book, put it back on the shelf, and went over to what Garen had caught. Rabbit. She knew why he had been catching the two of them rabbit so much more often. Ever since she seasoned some rabbit with a certain blend, he loved it, although he refused the idea that he loves the meal, saying things like, "The rabbits are just easier," and "this one was just closer," which made Dahlia smile. Once she had skinned and quartered the rabbit,
She began to season the meat with various herbs, garlic, a squeeze of lemon, salt, and a little bit of honey, while of course adding some black pepper for an extra spice. She then grilled the rabbit, the smell of spices exploding into the cabin, with the rabbit being so strong and meaty that the smell alone woke Garen. Is it ready? Garen said tiredly. Almost. Just a little while longer, and then I'll get you a plate, Dahlia said before she returned to the book she was reading as she waited. Garen sat up and looked at the ground in deep thought. He looked down, not sad necessarily, but a thought-provoking concern. Dahlia knew that look. He had had that look almost every morning back when she was tied to the post. She wanted to say something, because she had learned to care for others the same way he does to everyone, even his enemy, even her. However, she also knew that he would never answer when she says anything. So despite the ache in her to say something, anything about it, she knew she shouldn't. You know, Garen says after a sigh, I never thought that I'd say this, but I'm thankful for you. I don't like what you've done, but you've changed. Garen sighs again, hesitating to continue. Just keep it up, all right? Dahlia nodded softly before returning to the book, using it as some type of escape to get out of the conversation. She had butterflies in her stomach. She didn't love Garen, not in the traditional way, at least, but she did care about him and his opinion of her, as if he is the judge to dictate whether she has truly changed as much as she wanted. His comment proved her change, or at least some progress, and his approval couldn't mean anything more to her. After a long moment of silence, Dahlia broke it with a loud scratch from the chair as she got up. Garen took this as a sign that the dinner was ready and got up as well. He sat at the table as Dahlia prepared both of them a plate of the meal. She poured both of them a tankard of wine, bringing his meal and drink to the table before hers. Once again, Garen indulged in the rabbit hastily. Quite quickly, but not fast enough to make it obvious that he loves it. Or at least that was the intention. Dahlia smiled, and when it caught Garen's eye, he stopped for a minute. He was confused by her smile, still having a mouth full of rabbit. His confused expression pushed Dahlia over the edge, and she started to laugh quietly, still trying to hold it in. What? Garen asked, already annoyed, as he knew exactly what was making her laugh, and he hated that. You can just say you like it, Dahlia says with a smile, still holding back her laughter. Okay, I like it. Happy? Garen says before he continues to tear the meat from the bone. Dahlia lets out the last of her laughter, more like a sharp exhale than a laugh. Sure, I know you like it more than that, but I'll give up, she says teasingly. You don't know me, Garen says with a smile, retorting with the same teasing tone. How do you know how much I like this? Oh, come on. You couldn't make it any more obvious when you're eating like that. Dahlia and Garen continue to joke and play, neither realizing that this would be the first time that they ever joked with each other. However, the joking and teasing would come to an abrupt halt when they heard a knock. No, a banging on the door while a man screams for Garen. Sir Garen! Sir, please, it's important! Sir Garen! Sir Garen! His scream wasn't just a concerned yell, it was more like a desperate shriek, one that spread fear into both Garen and Dahlia. They both looked at each other with a worried expression, both equally concerned, but for completely different reasons. She knew it was only a matter of time. Garen stands up quickly, almost tipping the chair over. What is it? Garen says with a determined focus. A party! A huge party of men! Even for you, sir. They haven't attacked yet, but, well, may God save us when they do. the young man shouts back from behind the door. Garen looked back down at the ground with that same look, except this time with a more methodical shift in his pacing eyes. "Do they look organized?" Garen asked with a voice matching his methodical look. "Yes, sir. Very. Uniforms, spears, shields. I believe they hail from some army, but they bear no banner," the man responds with impatient anxiety. Garen nods, and his head sinks. Go tell the guards I'll stand with them. And if they're organized, maybe they could be diplomatic," Garen says with a sigh. The man thanked Garen with one last relieved bang on the door before he began running back to Grimwald. Garen rushed throughout the cabin, preparing and grabbing various tools he may need, all the while he sternly gave Dahlia orders. "I don't think I can cut down so many men alone, and if this is who I think it is, I'm gonna need your help. Your armor is at the forge, and there's many blades to choose from too. I'm going to get my armor, get equipped, and meet this force head-on. There will be archers from ours on the roofs and walls watching, so get with me at the front quickly. Don't dawdle." And with that final word, he slams the door and kicks off away from the cabin. When Dahlia gave chase and opened the door, he wasn't even visible through the thick forest. She hated this whole situation. Why now? Can she not be happy? She tears up for the first time in weeks. The tears roll down with a small ting along her cheek as it goes, matching the sting in her heart. She walks out to the forge and sees her old helmet. To anyone, this is just a helmet. But to Dahlia, this was so much more. So much more. Once a symbol of strength, showing her prowess and her power, now it's a symbol of weakness. She was strong, but she wasn't strong enough to break free from the chains that were that armor. That monster. But she can't just say she doesn't want to. Good lives were at stake. Rosca's, Grisham's, Benjamin's, Alex and Julie's, and even her own. She already betrayed one. She couldn't dishonor herself by doing it again. With the sting in her eye, she grabbed the dusty armor and headed inside to change. Dahlia ran as fast as she could to the front of town. She saw the army over the hills as she went. It was intimidating, even for her. She ran without her helmet, and many were shocked in fear at the recognition of her armor. Yet they were too panicked over the other force to even react. When she got to the gates, she didn't see Garen, or at least she didn't recognize him. What she did see was impeccable. Not the army, something else. Someone else. It was a knight of gold. He wore a golden suit of armor with a beautiful crimson red cape, with a red cross in the center that had a golden outline bringing it out. The armor was bright, even with the clouds and dark shroud of dusk, with subtle black engravings of flowers and roses all around the edges of the plates. "Why are you here?" the knight shouted at the armored man leading the army with a familiar voice. The Golden Knight was Garen. "Is that how you greet an old friend, Garen?" the leader said with a disgustingly familiar voice. Dahlia's deepest fears had come true. "We aren't friends. Why are you here?" Garen replied harshly. The man looks to Dahlia, who stood beside Garen. "Long time no see, my little spider. I heard you made yourself quite comfortable here, Aurea, but your task here was never supposed to be a vacation. If you don't want to die, you'll join me," Skull says so vindictively that it drops Dahlia's heart down to the ground. Before she could say anything, Garen shouted back. "She's not going anywhere, Skull," Garen says with anger. Skull laughs in response. "I know you're stubborn, brother, but I didn't think you'd sacrifice this many innocent lives over a killer," Skull says with a tauntingly playful tone, as if he wasn't stressed in the slightest. Garen grunted before he pulled his sword and pointed it at Skull. "Come and fight me. 1-on-1. If you win, you can leave with the girl. If not, you leave." Once again, Skull laughs in response. Me against you. Me against you. I know it's dishonorable to refuse, but I'd prefer to come out of this alive. Thank you, Skull says with a pompous smile. Very well then. You will die here with all of your sins, Garen says before he hits Dahlia on the arm, suggesting she prepares for a fight, as Garen crouches down and raises his sword defensively. I don't believe so, Skull says sarcastically as he raises his hand and signals his cavalry to attack. They rush forward quickly, Skull disappearing behind the rushing horses. Dahlia prepared for the rush, bracing her sword like a spear while staying low just as Garen is. Both Dahlia and Garen blocked and deflected each swinging mace, sword, and axe that was swung at them as the cavalry blazed past them into town, as arrows began flying from both sides overhead. After the kicked-up dust clears, the infantry cries out, a deep, determined war cry that would strike fear into anyone's hearts, but not Dahlia's. Despite everything, this was one of the only things she wouldn't be scared of. She's seen this all before, and judging by the knight that she stood beside, Garen felt the same. The soldiers met the two with hungry blades, but none were fed. Almost synchronized, both made sparks and blood fly. When a blade made contact with a plate, it was heavily punished. Piles of broken and dead men began to form, those being the only ones who stayed still. There was not a moment of silence, not a moment without furious yet elegant movement. With a sigh, Skull rushed in, stepping over his dead. You're strong, Garen, but not enough. Give up and it will be quick, Skull quips as he draws his sword. Garen glanced at Skull, recognizing his approach. However, there were too many men surrounding him to respond. Dahlia watched Garen every chance she spun his way, spinning like a dancer of death, killing her surrounding enemies quickly yet brutally. She only saw glances of his battle. She saw Skull take a swing at Garen before being deflected. Next, she saw Garen's back turn to the man, killing others behind him, as if Skull was just another soldier. This angered Skull, and his swings became more ferocious. Whether they hit Garen or not, Garen was unaffected, continuing to slaughter countless men as if they were just paper, just as Dahlia had been. Garen had disabled so many fighters to the point to where he was finally able to focus on the devil who had brought him out here. They were finally engaged in a tense stalemate. With their skills matched, their blades clashed constantly. The clashing steel created more sparks than the whole battle entirely. Any hit that connected was only on plate armor, so the pain was negligible with the adrenaline flying through their veins. However, the only reason why Skull wasn't dead was because of the few remaining troops surrounding Garen. Dahlia was still overwhelmed by her attackers, but she was managing. And Garen could easily defeat Skull one-on-one, but he was still balancing the other attackers, so he couldn't focus entirely on the man. Dahlia knew that, and she knew that even though he didn't have horns, he was a demon who needed to die. The Golden Knight needed air to breathe, so she became more brutal, more violent, invoking the monster that had been dormant inside of her for so long. She wasn't concerned with anything but delivering death to all of those around her. Her blade was so soaked in blood that swinging the thing caused blood to be tossed onto her target, the stain practically being a marker of death from the now red blade. Men dropped and dropped. Arms fell off bodies and bones snapped loudly. Despite the pain and carnage, the attackers couldn't even scream in pain because they went out so quickly. She slayed and slayed, until a spear pierced the armor gap in his armpit from behind. He didn't get to react. He fell, coughing. "Father!" Dahlia shouted reactively as she froze in shock. Garen coughed as the blood stained his gambeson under his armor. Skull raised his blade as he said something, but Dahlia was too angry to hear him clearly. Her vision blurred from the tears welling up behind her helmet. She grabbed her blade as tight as she has ever grabbed anything in her life, and she cut her way ferociously towards Skull with blistering speed. She cut her way to him and charged him, just as he was slamming the blade down at Garen, barely missing Garen as he stumbled back. She swung at his neck with fire in her blue eyes, yet he riposts, and he sends the tip of his blade at her head. She can barely see or hear, and fights purely on instinct and pure unbridled rage. She swung and swung furiously as he deflected every blow, saying something sarcastic every time. Not that Dahlia can hear it. It was just all mumbles to her. All she could hear was her inner thoughts. This was her fault. If she had never came, if she ran away when she had the chance, if she wasn't selfish and stayed where she was happy, this would have never happened. She cursed this town. She cursed Garen, and she did nothing to this town but bog it down the entire way. She wanted to die for it, but not without avenging her father. Skull would die. Feisty little one, aren't we, Svida? Skull says with a heavy breath as Dahlia focuses back into reality. She then realizes how exhausted she was. Her breath was heaving, her lungs expanding so far for air that every breath her chest pressed uncomfortably against the back of her steel breastplate. But this didn't slow her down. She still swung and swung at him. Aurea, you could still come back. I'm not promising you the position you had, as you did abandon me, but you'll live, Skull says charismatically, but to no avail. Put the sword down, woman, he demanded much more angrily. Dahlia doesn't respond. She saves her breath and puts it all into her sword. Aurea, you aren't going to... Ah! Skull gets hit by an arrow in the side, piercing his plate armor and chainmail, but not killing him, but giving Dahlia just enough time to slam her blade onto his neck. The strike was powerful, but his chainmail prevented a cut. His throat closed up from the blunt trauma, staggering him back further. He stumbles, and he trips over a body. Dahlia takes advantage of his lack of balance and shoves him to the ground. He drops his sword and scatters back away from Dahlia, who approaches slowly. Aurea? Negotiations are still... Skull's begging was cut short by Aurea's boot against his throat. She uses her sword to push off his helmet. Curse you, Aurea, were Skull's last ragged words before Dahlia's sword dug into his eye forcefully and pierced straight through his head. The demon was dead, but she hadn't won. Dahlia turns around and scans the battlefield for Garen. She saw the Golden Knight leaned up against a wall of a nearby building. She sprints toward him despite her exhaustion. She kneels at his side and she throws her helmet away, revealing her red, puffy face from all of the tears. Garen! Garen, are you alright? Will you live? Garen, speak to me! Garen! Dahlia shrieks in his face while she rips the helmet off of his head. Garen lazily opens his eyes and looks at Dahlia. He smiles weakly as he drools blood before coughing. I'm dead, girl, Garen says cynically with a smile. Both knew it was true, but Dahlia was in denial, shaking her head and repeating no over and over again with a shaky breath. Hey, Garen says loudly as he throws his weak arm at her face to make her look him in the eyes. Listen to me. Before I go, I have something to tell you, he says before he coughs up blood again. I hated you for what you did. I'm sorry I didn't explain who I was, but I knew Skull, and I knew what he would do to you kids. I'm so happy you changed, but... He was interrupted by a sharp cough, and he couldn't speak momentarily as he heaved. But please, take my place. These people can't protect themselves from the evils like Horkos or any other threats. Forget Dahlia Aurea. She deserved death. You are Dahlia Aurea. Garen finishes as he presses his index finger into the golden helmet. He then leans his head back against the wall, and Dahlia begins to cry as she dropped her head. Yes. Father. I will follow in your footsteps. Thank you, sir.
I will never.
Dahlia looks back up to Garen and notices his eyes aren't moving. His chest isn't rising, and his smile fell. Dahlia screams in a mix of sadness and anger as she bangs on the wooden wall behind Garen's now lifeless body. Dahlia pulls him into an embrace, soaking in the remaining warmth of his body, uncaring for the darkening crimson blood that coats the both of them. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I did this, and I'm so sorry. She pulls off his chainmail hood and brushes his eyes closed. She sniffled before grabbing his helmet. It was the only thing that wasn't bloodied. It was a sign. This town wasn't meant to be abandoned. She didn't have to rip these people from their homes. Half of Skull's party is dead, and the small number of guards and archers have been able to hold their own, but they needed help with the offense. Dahlia flips the helmet around and slowly puts it on. She will avenge Garen. I will not slaughter the weak. I will protect them, Dahlia screamed in her head as she cut down more men coldly as she shouted orders to the remaining guards like she had long ago. I will not allow children to become the person that I am, she screamed in her head as she beheaded men who charged her. I will protect Grimwald as he had, she thought as she stabbed a man in the back who had an innocent pinned against a wall. I am Dahlia Aurea, she says softly to herself as she watches archers fire at the retreating attackers. Once the noise had died down, everyone realized they were safe. They began to cheer, cry out in happiness, and many immediately began helping each other with the recovery. But there were some who recognized the armor that Dahlia wore, and Dahlia knew that it was finally time to admit the truth. She gathered as many as she could to the town square, at the gallows, and she climbed on top of it. Hark! Please, listen to me. I have something I must admit to all of you. Something I should have said long ago. The crowd whispers and murmurs among themselves as Dahlia takes off Garen's helmet and braces herself for what she is about to say with a sniffle. I am a disciple of Skull. Long ago, I led a raid onto this village, and I committed atrocities here, Dahlia said with a shaky voice. The crowd stayed silent, curious of what Dahlia may say. Garen saved us. And by us, I mean, he allowed me to be here. To be me. The crowd murmured as Dahlia finished, but went silent immediately when she breathed in again to speak. Both Skull and Garen are dead. But you wench! You got Garen killed! A man shouts in the back as he pushed to the front. I didn't kill him, but you'll hang for that, the man interrupts again as he climbed up onto the gallons and grabs Dahlia by the neck, shoving her towards the noose. Dahlia was much stronger than this man, but she allowed it to happen, as a part of her knew she deserved this. Many in the crowd began to support the man's idea, shouting and insulting and cursing Dahlia. Dahlia closed her eyes as the man wrapped the noose around her neck. Wait! A young voice screamed out, silencing the crowd. A young boy climbed up as well. Dahlia knew the boy. It was Alexander, Lady Grisham's son. She was a bad knight, but she killed the bad guys. That guy hurt everyone. She shouldn't get hurt for it. As Alex screamed at the man, Dahlia wanted to cry, but she had no more tears left, so instead she dropped her head, bracing for what's to come. The man laughed at the kid. Get lost, kid. She cost me my home when she attacked, he says angrily, as he walked toward the lever that would drop Dahlia down to hang. But she saved mine today, another young voice screamed out. Dahlia recognized the little voice. Julie, Alex's little sister. Mommy says it's okay to make mistakes. That's what she did, so let her go. The man scoffs in response. You kids are too young to understand. The man turns back around to the lever and looks at Dahlia. Any last words, you barbarian? Dahlia shook her head. You are the girl. Let her go. a brash, deep voice says as someone walks up the stairs of the gallows, the wood creaking under his feet. As he walks past Dahlia's view, she sees the bloody apron he wore. It was the butcher, Toldor. He grabs the man by the shoulder and rips him away from the lever. Julie, thinking that the two are about to fight, runs and punches the man in the groin before scurrying away. The man winces and grimaces as he struggles with Benjamin before both are interrupted by Ruska. "You children," she says with an angry tone Dahlia had never dreamed of Grandma Rosa having. "Garin is dead! You think this is a good way to honor him? He has built this town up from ash, time and time again. I would know. I was there. But everyone has their time to go. He knew that. So if he put his trust in Dahlia, then by God, I will put as much trust in her as I did in that man. Now, quit acting like children, and let's bury our dead for God's sake." Benjamin turns back to the man and pushes him away. The man struggles to formulate a response while Benjamin cuts the noose and lifts it off of Dahlia. "Come on, let's go get Garin," Benjamin says while he guides her off of the gallows. As the man storms off as well, the crowd disperses now that there was no more drama. To honor Garin Aurea, Dahlia took the golden armor Garin wore and refitted it to her body. She swore on her life that she would protect the innocent when in need. After all, she is Dahlia Aurea.